I trusted my daughter with everything. I believed she would always protect me, even when I felt unsure of myself. That morning at the bank, I learned she had already been preparing for a life where my voice no longer mattered. This is what happened next. The bank was quiet in the way only banks are quiet. Not peaceful, just controlled. The kind of quiet that makes you lower your voice without realizing it. The carpet swallowed the sound of footsteps. Somewhere behind the glass offices, a printer hummed steadily, spitting out documents that would change people's lives without ever knowing their names. I stood in line holding my purse close to my body, the leather strap warm from my grip. The air smelled faintly of paper and cleaning solution. It reminded me of offices I had worked in years ago, back when I balanced checkbooks by hand and trusted numbers because they stayed where you put them. My daughter stood beside me, slightly behind my right shoulder, close enough to guide me forward when the line moved, close enough to feel like support. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had gotten used to her positioning herself that way. She had insisted on coming with me, just to help, she said, just in case anything is confusing. I hadn't argued. I rarely did anymore. When it was our turn, the teller smiled at my daughter first. I noticed that before anything else. It was a quick glance, practiced, like she already knew who would be answering the questions. "Good morning," the teller said. "How can I help you today?" My daughter spoke before I could. "We need to review my mother's accounts," she said. "There may have been some irregular activity." I felt my chest tighten. "Irregular activity?" I asked. My daughter placed a hand lightly on my forearm. "It's nothing to worry about, Mom. Just routine." The teller nodded and turned her screen slightly so my daughter could see it better. She didn't ask for my permission. She didn't look at me again. I shifted my weight, suddenly aware of how old my shoes looked against the clean tile floor. I tried to tell myself this was normal, that I was being sensitive. The teller typed for a few moments, her fingers moving quickly, confidently. Then she paused. Her expression changed, just slightly. She glanced at my daughter. "It looks like there are multiple linked accounts here," she said. "Secondary authorization has been active for several months." "Linked accounts?" I repeated. My daughter squeezed my arm again, this time a little firmer. "Let her finish," she said quietly. The teller continued, still addressing my daughter. "There have been regular transfers labeled as care-related expenses. Everything appears authorized, but since you requested a review, we can go over the details. Care-related expenses." I felt a strange buzzing in my ears, like the room had tilted without moving. "I didn't request a review," I said. The teller looked startled. She glanced at me, then back to my daughter. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said. "I thought—" My daughter smiled, calm, polite, controlled. "It's fine," she said. "My mother gets overwhelmed by financial discussions. I usually handle these things for her, usually." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not tears yet. Just the pressure of something swelling too fast. "I can handle my own finances," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. The teller hesitated, clearly uncomfortable now. "Of course," she said. I just need to follow what's on file. On file. She turned the screen slightly toward me, and for the first time I saw it. My name at the top, account holder, and beneath it, another name. My daughter's authorized representative. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the dates, the amounts, the neat list of transactions marching down the page like they had always belonged there. When did this happen? I asked. My daughter answered without hesitation. After your fall, she said. When things were stressful, you asked me to take care of it. I searched my memory. The fall, the hospital, the paperwork they brought in when I was tired and sore and scared of making mistakes. I remembered signing something. I remembered her telling me it was temporary, just for emergencies. This doesn't look temporary, I said. The teller cleared her throat. If you'd like, we can print a full statement, she said. Yes, I said, please. My daughter's hand dropped from my arm. Mom, do we really need to go through all of this right now? She asked. Right now felt like the only time that mattered. The printer behind the counter started up, its mechanical rhythm loud in the quiet room. Each page slid out slowly, deliberately, as if it understood the weight of what it carried. As the teller stacked the papers, I noticed my daughter's posture shift. Her shoulders squared, her jaw tightened, not with fear, with irritation. When the teller handed me the pages, our fingers brushed. Take your time, she said gently. I looked down at the first page. Transfers, dates, notes, all written in the calm language of systems that assume consent, unless told otherwise. My purse slipped slightly from my lap. I adjusted it automatically, my hands moving out of habit while my mind struggled to keep up. I wasn't just being helped, I was being managed. The realization settled in slowly, like dust in still air. This wasn't about a single transaction, or a misunderstanding, or concern. This was preparation. And as I stood there in that bank, holding proof that decisions had been made without me, I understood something that made my stomach drop. This hasn't started today. Today was just the first time I was allowed to see it. Before that morning at the bank, before the quiet way my name appeared beside decisions I did not remember making, there was a long stretch of life where trusting my daughter felt as natural as breathing. That is what made everything afterwards so disorienting. Nothing about our history suggested this would be how things unfolded. I raised her mostly on my own. Her father died when she was 13, suddenly, without warning. One day he was complaining about a headache. The next I was standing in a hospital hallway listening to words that sounded like they belonged to someone else's life. Stroke, severe, irreversible. I remember holding her hand while the doctor explained what would happen next. She didn't cry right away. She asked questions instead, practical ones. How long would he be there? Would he wake up? Who would pick her up from school? Even then, she wanted to understand the system. After the funeral, it was just the two of us in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. I worked longer hours. I learned how to fix things myself. I balanced bills late at night at the kitchen table while she did homework across from me, both of us pretending we were fine. She grew up fast. People always said that. So mature, so responsible. I took pride in it. I thought it meant I was doing something right. As she got older, she developed a habit of watching me closely, not in a suspicious way, in a protective way, or so I believed. She noticed when I skipped meals, when I stayed up too late, when I sighed without realizing it. "You should rest more, Mom," she would say. "You don't need to do everything yourself." At first, it felt comforting. After everything we had been through, having someone care enough to notice felt like a gift. When she moved out, she still called often, asked about my health, my finances, my plans. She offered advice freely, confidently. I listened because she sounded sure, and because part of me was tired of being the one who always knew what to do. After I turned 70, the tone shifted slightly. Doctors began speaking more slowly to me. The clerks explained things I already understood, and my daughter started stepping in during conversations, filling pauses before I realized I had left them. "Mom, let me handle this," she would say. "It's easier." And it was easier. That was the dangerous part. When my husband's health began to decline, she became more involved. She came to appointments, sat beside me, took notes, asked questions I didn't think to ask because my mind was already full of worry. The doctors looked at her when they answered. I noticed it. I also noticed how relieving it felt not to carry everything alone. Paperwork followed, forms with small print and reassuring titles, emergency contacts, authorization documents. She explained them carefully. "This is just in case," she said. "If you're ever too stressed, if something happens suddenly." I trusted her. I always had. I signed where she told me to sign. I didn't read every line. I told myself it didn't matter. She was my daughter. She wouldn't misuse something meant to protect me. After my fall, the dynamic deepened. She drove me everywhere, spoke to therapists, answered questions before I had fully processed them. "She gets overwhelmed easily," she would say with a smile. I laughed it off. I told myself she was exaggerating to be helpful. Looking back now, I can see how language changed over time, how care slowly became interpretation, how concern became summary, how my silence began to stand in for agreement. There were moments I should have questioned, times when she corrected me in front of others, when she spoke about my feelings as if they were settled facts. Mom doesn't do well with stress. Mom forgets details. I didn't argue. Arguing felt ungrateful, and somewhere along the way, I started to wonder if maybe she was right, if maybe needing help meant stepping back. That is how the past works when you look at it closely. Nothing is sharp. Nothing feels like betrayal at the moment. It feels like accommodation, like love adjusting to age. Standing at that bank counter, holding those printed statements, I realized something that made my chest ache. The teller's confidence hadn't come from nowhere. My daughter's certainty hadn't formed overnight. The past had prepared this moment, slowly, quietly, with my permission, given in pieces. And as I folded the papers carefully and placed them back into my purse, I understood that whatever came next would not be a misunderstanding. It would be reckoning with everything I had allowed to seem normal. The first lie did not sound like a lie. That is what unsettled me most when I thought back on it later. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It didn't arrive with anger or raised voices. It came wrapped in calm language, delivered with a tone I had trusted for years. It happened the afternoon after the bank visit. We sat in my car in the parking lot, the engine still running. The sun reflected off the windshield of the building across from us, making it hard to see clearly. I kept my purse on my lap, the folder of bank papers tucked inside like something alive I was afraid to disturb. My daughter stared straight ahead, her hands resting on the steering wheel even though we weren't moving. "Mom," she said finally, "I didn't want you to find out like that." "Find out what?" I asked. She sighed, slow and controlled. "Those things were getting harder for you to manage," she said. "Financially, emotionally, it's been a lot since the fall." I turned toward her. "I didn't ask you to take over my accounts," I said. She nodded, as if acknowledging a point in a discussion she believed she had already won. "You didn't have to ask," she replied. "You were overwhelmed. You kept saying you didn't want to make a mistake." That part was true. I had said that more than once, and that was how the lie worked. She took something I had admitted in a moment of vulnerability and stretched it into something else entirely. "I told you I was tired," I said, "not incapable." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw irritation flicker across her face before she smoothed it away. "Mom," she said gently, "you don't always know when you're not thinking clearly." The words settled between us, heavy and quiet. I asked her when she added herself to my accounts. She hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. "After the hospital," she said, "when the paperwork came in, it was standard. You signed it." I remembered signing something. I remembered the nurse standing at the foot of the bed. The pain medication makes the room feel slightly unreal. I remembered my daughter telling me it was just in case. "Just in case what?" I asked now. "Just in case you needed help," she said. "Which you did." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Help doesn't mean secrecy," I said. She shook her head slightly. "I wasn't hiding anything," she said. "I was handling it. There's a difference." That was the lie. Not that she had access, but that handling something meant removing me from it entirely. We drove home in silence. That evening, she cooked dinner in my kitchen as if nothing had changed. She moved things around, reorganized a drawer, made small comments about what needed fixing. I watched her without speaking, noticing how comfortable she seemed, how natural it was for her to take up space that used to be mine alone. After dinner, she brought out a stack of papers. "I made copies of everything so you don't have to worry," she said. I flipped through them slowly. Bank summaries, bills, notes written in her handwriting. "You're doing too much without telling me," I said. She smiled again, that same practiced expression. "You wouldn't have wanted the stress," she replied. There it was again. "So you wouldn't have to worry, so you don't get overwhelmed." Each phrase sounded like care, each one quietly erased choice. I asked her if she had spoken to anyone else about my finances. She paused. "Just to get advice," she said. Nothing official. Advice from whom? I asked. A friend, someone who knows about these things. She waved her hand dismissively. The way she avoided specifics made my stomach sink. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling long after the house went quiet. I replayed every conversation, every moment where she had spoken for me while I stayed silent. The lie wasn't that she loved me. The lie was that love gave her permission to decide when my voice stopped counting. And as sleep finally crept in, heavy and uneasy, I understood something that made my chest ache. If this was the first lie, then there would be others. Because lies like that don't stand alone. They prepare the ground for what comes next. The eviction did not begin with a notice. There was no letter taped to a door, no deadline circled in red. No one told me I had to leave. It began with a suggestion that sounded almost thoughtful. 2 mornings after the bank visit, my daughter arrived early, too early. I was still in my robe, the kettle just beginning to whistle, when I heard her key in the lock. She had kept a spare for years. I had never questioned it. She stepped inside, carrying a paper cup of coffee and a folded jacket. "You should think about staying with me for a while," she said, as if continuing a conversation we had already agreed on. I turned off the stove slowly. "Why?" I asked. She set the coffee down on the counter, careful, deliberate. "Things are unsettled right now," she said. "You've been through a lot. The fall, the stress, the bank situation. It's not good for you to be alone." "Alone," I said. "I'm in my own house." She smiled, the kind of smile that tries to soften what it's about to say. "That's exactly what I mean." I sat down at the table. The chair creaked in the familiar way it always had. I noticed the sound because it grounded me. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. She nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Let's just talk about options," she said. "Options." That afternoon, she started moving things. Not packing, not officially, just small changes. She reorganized my medications into a new container I hadn't bought. She gathered mail from the counter and placed it into a folder she brought with her. She unplugged the lamp in the living room and said it was a tripping hazard. I watched her, my chest tight, unsure when the line had been crossed. The next day, I received a call. It was from a woman who introduced herself as a home safety coordinator. She spoke kindly, professionally. "Your daughter requested an assessment," she said, "just to make sure everything is suitable for your recovery." Requested. I told her no one had discussed that with me. There was a pause. "We'll still need to proceed," she said carefully. "It's recommended given your recent injury." Recommended. The assessment happened 2 days later. A man and a woman walked through my house with clipboards, nodding at each other, pointing quietly at rugs and stairs and door frames. They spoke about modifications as if I were already absent. My daughter followed them, answering questions. "She lives alone," she said. "She forgets to turn lights on. She resists change." I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, listening to my life being described in fragments. That evening, my daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I think it's best if you stay with me temporarily," she said, "until we sort things out." Temporarily, I repeated. She nodded. Just until everything stabilizes. I asked her when I would come back home. She didn't answer right away. Soon, she said finally. The next morning she arrived with a suitcase. I stared at it, confusion blooming into something colder. What is that? I asked. She didn't meet my eyes. I packed some essentials, she said, just in case. Just in case what? I asked. Just in case you need more support. I realized then that this was no longer a conversation. It was a plan. She drove me to her house that afternoon. I watched familiar streets slide past the window, noticing every turn she didn't take. When we pulled into her driveway, my hands were clenched tightly in my lap. Her house was clean, neutral, nothing on the walls that told a story. She showed me a room at the end of the hall. You can stay here, she said. I asked for my house keys. She hesitated. Let's not rush that, she said. We'll see how you do. That night, lying in a bed that didn't know my weight, I listened to unfamiliar sounds. The house breathed differently. The silence felt borrowed. I understood then what had happened. I had not been forced out. I had been redirected. Slowly, politely, with language that sounded like care. And the most frightening part was this. If I wanted to go home, I would now have to explain why. My home had become something I needed permission to return to. That was the eviction. Quiet, reasonable, almost invisible. But once it had happened, nothing felt secure anymore. The discovery did not come from confrontation. It came from silence. The third morning at my daughter's house, she left early. She said she had errands, meetings, and things that needed handling. She placed my pills beside a glass of water and reminded me to rest. Her voice was calm, practiced. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway. Her house felt different when she was gone. Not empty, controlled. Every surface is intentional, nothing left where it did not belong. I told myself I was just looking for a book. Her office was at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and printer ink. Everything was neat, files stacked, labels facing forward. On the desk was a folder. My name was on it, typed, centered, clean. I stood there longer than I should have, my heart beating louder with every second. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Medical paperwork, copies of things I had already seen. I opened it. The first pages were bank statements. At first, I did not recognize the account numbers. Then I saw my name again. Account holder. My hands began to tremble. I sat down slowly in the chair. There were transfers listed. Small amounts at first. Labeled care coordination, household assistance, administrative support. The dates caught my attention. Each one lined up with something I remembered. The week of my fall. The day she said she would handle the bills. In the afternoon, she told me not to worry about money. I turned the page. More transfers, larger now, moved quietly, frequently. I pulled my wallet from my purse and opened my notebook where I kept passwords written in careful handwriting. I logged into my bank account on her computer. The screen loaded slowly. When it did, my chest tightened. There were linked accounts I did not recognize. Authorized users. Her name was there. So was another account listed under a name I had never seen before. I clicked on it. The money moved through that account before disappearing somewhere else. I sat very still. I remembered her telling me she had reorganized things to make it easier while I recovered. I remembered trusting her. I flipped back through the folder. There were copies of forms I had signed months earlier. Emergency authorizations. The language highlighted neatly. In certain circumstances, if the patient becomes overwhelmed. Attached were notes. Patients may struggle with complex decisions under stress. Family assisting with financial management. Assisting. The word felt dishonest now. At the bottom of the folder was a document that made my breath catch. A legal consultation summary. It mentioned guardianship, asset protection, temporary housing arrangements, preparation. I closed the folder slowly and pressed my palms flat against the desk. This was not confusion. This was the structure. I returned everything exactly as I found it and walked back to the kitchen. I sat at the table, staring at the surface until my tea went cold. When my daughter came home later that afternoon, she moved through the house easily, hung up her coat, set down her bag. The confidence of someone who believed everything was under control. I asked her one question. Where is my money going? She stopped, just for a moment. Then she turned toward me and smiled. What do you mean? She asked. I told her I had seen the accounts. The smile faded. She sighed and sat down across from me. I told you, she said. I've been managing things. You didn't want the stress. I asked her why she had not told me about the transfers. Because you would worry, she said, and worrying isn't good for you. I asked her about the legal paperwork. Her eyes flicked away. That was just planning, she said, in case something happened. Something like what? She did not answer. At that moment, the discovery settled fully into place. This was not about help. It was about control. A version of me existed on paper that I did not recognize. A woman described as fragile, confused, dependent. And that version was being used to justify decisions I had never agreed to. That night, lying awake in a bed that was not mine, I stared at the ceiling and understood something that chilled me. She was not improvising. She was preparing. And if I did not act soon, the story written about me would become harder to undo than the truth I was still holding quietly inside myself. I did not confront her that night. I needed the truth to settle first, to move from shock into something steadier. If I spoke too soon, it would come out as pleading or disbelief, and I could not afford either. I had already been described as overwhelmed, emotional, fragile. So I waited. The next evening, she cooked dinner. The smell of onions and garlic filled the house, familiar and almost comforting. She moved easily around the kitchen, humming softly, as if nothing had shifted, as if the ground beneath us had not cracked. We sat across from each other at the small table. She placed a plate in front of me and reminded me to eat slowly. You need to keep your strength up, she said. I watched her hands as she spoke. Steady, confidence, These were the same hands I once held when she was small, crossing busy streets, afraid of getting lost. When she began clearing the dishes, I spoke. "I went into your office today," I said. She froze, just slightly. I saw the bank statements, the linked accounts, the legal papers. She turned slowly and looked at me. "You went through my things," she said. "No," I replied. "I went through mine." She set the plate down harder than necessary. "You shouldn't have been snooping," she said. I asked her why my money was being moved without my knowledge. She rubbed her temples, the way she did when she felt inconvenienced. "Mom," she said, "I have explained this already. I am handling things so you do not have to." "Handling does not mean hiding," I said. She pulled out a chair and sat heavily. "Everything I have done is for your benefit," she said. I asked her about the account I did not recognize. She hesitated. "That is just a holding account," she said. "It is more efficient." "Efficient for whom?" I asked. Her eyes flashed. "Why are you interrogating me like this?" she said. "I rearranged my life to take care of you." I asked her why she had consulted a lawyer about guardianship. That stopped her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood up. "I needed to know my options," she said, "in case things got worse." "Worse?" I asked. "You fell," she snapped. "You broke a rib. You could not manage on your own. You were confused. You were overwhelmed." "I was injured," I said, "not incapable." She began pacing. "You do not see it," she said. "You forget things. You second-guess yourself. You blame yourself for everything." I asked her if she had told the doctors that. She did not deny it. "They needed the full picture," she said. "The picture you painted," I replied. Her voice hardened. If I had not stepped in, mistakes would have been made. "Mistakes like what?" I asked. She stopped pacing and looked at me. "Like you insisting on going home and getting hurt again, like mishandling money, like refusing help out of pride." Something steady rose inside me then. "This does not help," I said. "This is control." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You are being dramatic," she said. "This is exactly why people worry about you." I told her I had contacted the bank. Her face was drained of color. "You did what?" I told her I had requested a full review of my accounts, that I knew exactly what authority she had and what she did not. "You cannot just undo things like that," she said. "Everything is in transition." "Exactly," I replied. Her voice rose slightly. "You are making this adversarial," she said. "We are family." "Family does not remove someone piece by piece," I said. She grabbed her coat from the chair. "If you keep this up," she said, "things will escalate." I looked at her calmly. "I hope they do," I said. She froze, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You are not thinking clearly," she said. "And when this blows up, do not say I did not try to protect you." She left without another word. The door closed harder than usual. I sat alone at the table, my heart racing, my hands steady in my lap. The confrontation was over, and I knew, with a certainty that surprised me, that whatever came next would not be gentle. Because people who believe they are entitled to your life do not let go quietly. The truth did not come from her. It came from people who had no reason to protect her version of events. 2 mornings after she left, my phone rang before the sun was fully up. I was sitting at the small desk in the guest room, writing everything down: dates, conversations, words that had felt harmless at the time but now carried weight. The caller introduced herself as a case manager from the rehabilitation center. Her voice was careful, neutral, different from before. "We are reviewing documentation connected to your discharge and follow-up care," she said. "There appear to be inconsistencies." Inconsistencies. She explained that during an internal review, notes had been flagged, statements attributed to me that did not align with recorded observations, recommendations made without direct confirmation. My chest tightened. She asked if I was aware that my daughter had submitted additional concerns after my discharge. Concerns about my cognitive clarity, my ability to live independently, my financial judgment. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I am aware now." There was a pause. "Have you been formally evaluated for cognitive impairment?" she asked. "No," I said. "That matters," she replied quietly. Later that same day, the bank called. Not the branch manager I knew. Someone higher. They explained that my request for review had uncovered irregularities. Not illegal yet, but concerning. Transfers made under broad authorization without clear documentation of consent for specific transactions. They asked if I wished to freeze secondary access. "Yes," I said. My hands did not shake. That afternoon, I met with an attorney recommended by a friend I had not spoken to honestly in years. Saying it out loud felt like admitting failure, like confessing I had missed something obvious. He listened without interrupting, without correcting me, without finishing my sentences. When I finished, he leaned back. "What you are describing is called preemptive incapacity framing," he said. I asked him to explain. "It means someone builds a narrative early," he said. "Concern becomes record. Record becomes justification." He told me my daughter had contacted legal counsel weeks earlier, asked about guardianship, timelines, what documentation would support it. She had not filed anything, he said, but she had prepared. That word again. Prepared. The next call came from adult services. Someone had expressed concern about my well-being. A caseworker arrived 2 days later, younger than I expected, calm, observant. She asked questions, simple at first, then layered, about my routine, my finances, my understanding of recent events. I answered slowly, carefully. I showed her everything, the bank statements, the forms, the notes I had written in my own hand. She read it all. At the end, she looked up at me. "You are not confused," she said. "You are distressed by being excluded." The distinction mattered. She told me her report would reflect that no further action would be taken, that concerns about my capacity were unsupported. When she left, I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the street. The truth was no longer only mine. It existed outside my daughter's voice. And once truth leaves the house, it does not return quietly. The collapse did not arrive loudly. There was no shouting, no final argument, no dramatic moment where everything broke at once. It came in silence. My daughter did not come back after that, not that week, not the next. At first, I kept expecting her car to pull into the driveway. I found myself listening for footsteps on the porch, for the familiar sound of her key in the lock. Nothing came. The house settled into a quiet I had not felt in years. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows when something has been removed and the space has not yet adjusted. 3 days passed. Then my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I answered. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, thinner, less certain, as if she was calling from somewhere she did not recognize. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk." I told her I was listening. She did not start with concern this time. She started with frustration. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" she asked. "People are calling me. The bank, the hospital. They are asking questions. Questions only matter when answers are missing," I said. She went quiet. "I was just trying to help," she said finally. "Help does not erase someone," I replied. Her voice wavered. "I was scared," she said. "Everything was changing. You were hurt. I thought I was losing control." "Control of what?" I asked. She did not answer right away. Then she said it, softly, almost to herself. "I did not think you would fight back." That was the collapse. Not of systems, not paperwork, but of the assumption she had built everything on, that I would remain quiet, that I would defer, that I would accept being managed in the name of care. She did not threaten escalation again. She did not speak of safety or planning. She ended the call soon after, not angry, not kind, just defeated. That evening, I walked through my house slowly. I touched the door frames, the backs of chairs, the familiar edges of furniture that had held my life for decades. The house felt steady, not because nothing had happened, but because I was no longer being pushed out of it. The collapse was quiet, and it was complete. The house feels different now, not louder, not emptier, clearer. In the mornings, I sit at the small table by the window with a cup of tea and listen to the sounds I once rushed past. The kettle clicks as it cools, the steady tick of the clock, the distant hum of traffic moving on without me. My keys hang on the hook by the door where they have always been. My coat rests within reach. My chair by the window waits every afternoon. Nothing looks different. Everything is. I still think about my daughter. A mother does not erase a child simply because trust was broken. But I no longer confuse love with surrender. I no longer believe that care requires silence. We have not repaired what was damaged. Not neatly, not fully. Some wounds need distance. Some may never close the way you expect. I have accepted that. What I have not accepted is disappearing. When doctors speak now, they look at me. When papers are signed, I read every word. I ask questions. I take my time. I am not difficult. I am present. That is what this taught me. Age does not cancel authority. Injury does not erase competence. and needing help does not mean giving up your place in your own life. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If something in it feels familiar, you are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, told slowly and honestly, you are welcome to stay. Sometimes being seen is the first step back to yourself. And sometimes finding your voice again is the quietest form of justice there is.